It's been a little under 24 hours since we learned that Vice President Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz to be her running mate. But as the nation learns more about the little-known Minnesota governor, we want to check in with one man who predicted that pick.
Yeah, Chicagoan and former senior advisor to Harris, Mike Nellis. Mike, thank you for being with us again this morning. When we had 6 candidates and the finalists, you predicted that it would be this Minnesota governor, and that is the case. Thanks for joining us live again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so why were you so sure that your former boss would pick Tim Walz for this position?
Well, one, I got lucky. I think we should say that up front. But I think for me, I was trying to read the tea leaves a little bit. On Friday, it seemed a little too obvious to me that it might be leaning towards Shapiro. And I also just felt like watching Governor Walz over the last couple of weeks, he was really impressive as a candidate. The clarity of his message, the intention of his purpose, and why he wanted to be on this ticket and why he wanted to campaign for Kamala Harris was really powerful and impressive.
You know, Walz emerged as somewhat of a dark horse over much better known names like Pete Buttigieg, Senator Mark Kelly, and Governor J.B. Pritzker from, of course, Illinois. What do you think he adds to the ticket that those others may not have added?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. Like, first, he's a powerful communicator. If you watched his speech last night, he did such an incredible job articulating the case, not just against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance for their radical policies, but also the reason to get behind Kamala Harris and her vision for the future. I also think he has a very clear everyman appeal that's going to appeal to a lot of folks. I mean, the campaign's out there selling camo merch right now with the Harris-Walz logo on top of it. That's the kind of thing you don't see Democrats do. So it's a new kind of ticket appealing to a different kind of candidate or different kind of voter.
Before I ask you this next question, just to clarify, you worked on strategy with Kamala Harris, correct, in the past?
Yeah, I was a senior advisor for many years. I oversaw all of her digital.
All right, so let's talk about strategy then in the coming few weeks ahead. I mean, they're coming to Chicago. What do you think they really need to focus on, especially when it comes to what the opponents will be attacking them on?
Yeah, for the next 2 weeks, I think getting prepped and ready for the convention, going across the country, meeting with battleground voters, clearly articulating what the vision for the future is, and then introducing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to the American people, which I think we're in the process of doing right now. Last night's speech was a great step forward. In terms of what the Republicans are going to do, they're going to use the same playbook they always do, which is they're going to act like we've nominated 2 of the most radical candidates in America, which just isn't the case, right? Like, they're going to try to make feeding starving kids and protecting our fundamental freedoms and values and building an economy that works for everybody. They're going to pretend that that's radical when it's not.
Yeah.
So I would just stick to what we know.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we appreciate your insight. I'm sure we'll be talking with you more in the coming weeks and days. Thanks, Mike Nellis, for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
It has been a wild 24 hours for Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, that's for sure. He was announced as the running mate for Vice President Kamala Harris, and then hours later, addressing thousands at a Philadelphia rally. For some, this pick was a surprise, but one man isn't really that surprised that Walz made it to the top of that VP list. Joining us now is Chicagoan and former senior advisor to Vice President Harris, Mike Nellis. Mike, thanks again for joining us. Now, I know this was a shock to some, this pick, but not to you. Why?
Watched the last couple of weeks where all of the different vice presidential potential picks were out there campaigning for the vice president. You saw Governor Walz skyrocket, I think, to the top of the national discussion because of how great of a public speaker he is, how great of a job he did clarifying the message. Like, not a lot of people know this, but he's the origin of where the Trump and J.D. Vance are weird talking point has come from, which I think has proven to be a very important piece of this. He has a great story. He's done a great job clarifying the message of the Harris campaign, and he's going to do a wonderful job on the ticket with her.
Now, we are getting a crash course on who Governor Walz is over the past 24 hours. 60 years old, former high school teacher, born and raised in Nebraska, Army reservist for 24 years, then elected to Congress. But what does he bring to the table in this role as VP that you think is key?
Well, I think the number one thing is that for Vice President Harris, he's someone that she can govern with, someone she can trust when the chips are down, when they've got to make a tough decision. He's going to be in the room with her, helping her build coalitions and get stuff done. Second to that, he's going to open a ton of doors for the Democratic Party, give us opportunities to have conversations with groups that we have not historically done a great job in the last 20 years organizing, like rural voters, be able to have conversations in a way that are more relatable on the issues that we care about. And he's going to be able to bring his powerful personal story to this race. I'm particularly captivated when he talks about his daughter, Hope, and why he named her Hope after he and his wife struggled to have her, and they were only able to have her because of fertility treatments like IVF, which is something that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump would outlaw or severely restrict thanks to Project 2025 if they won.
Right, and I would imagine too the fact that he grew up in Nebraska, going back to being able to reach out to rural groups, and also his initial congressional district, the makeup of that is definitely going to help him relate to maybe populations outside of the urban center.
I think that's right. He's going to be able to go out there and talk to voters that we haven't been able to talk to in a long time.
Yeah. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro was also on the short list for the job. Why would they introduce Walz in Shapiro's home state yesterday? Is it one of those nothing personal, it's just politics sort of moves?
Yeah, I think it was nothing personal. Like, a lot of folks are trying to find a reason that Governor Shapiro didn't get the nod, but I don't think it had anything to do with Governor Shapiro. I think it had everything to do with Governor Walz being the right man for the right moment. Like, Governor Shapiro is an incredible governor. Guy's got a 61% approval rating in his state. That's essentially unheard of in any state in America for any politician at this level of partisanship. But I think at the end of the day, Governor Walz really resonated with a lot of folks, and he sat down in a room with Kamala Harris and won her over and made her feel like he'd be the best running mate in this race and the best governing partner when she wins in November.
After lots and lots of vetting. So I know you oversaw Harris's digital strategy for a time. So from a strategic perspective right now, what's the #1 thing that you think the Harris-Walz campaign should be doing before the DNC?
I think keeping up the energy and keeping up the enthusiasm for this race. We have not seen energy from the Democratic Party like this in over 20 years. To me, right now feels an awful lot like the Barack Obama presidential campaign in 2007 and 2008. There is so much energy for the Harris campaign right now that it outmatches the capacity and infrastructure that they have right now, which is considerable. That's why you see all these organizations that are organizing these Zoom calls and organizing their communities and raising money all on their own. They got to keep that enthusiasm up. And then what they need to do is go out there and introduce Kamala Harris and introduce Tim Walz to the American people and talk about what the future of America looks like with the two of them in charge of our country.
Yeah, of course they have to, match. There's a lot of enthusiasm for Trump's campaign, especially with his base right now. So, that it'll be, a lot of energy versus a lot of energy potential, which is going to make for a very interesting few months, don't you think?
Perhaps, but I think that the energy and enthusiasm for the Harris campaign far outweighs the energy and enthusiasm we're seeing from Donald Trump. And if you look at your social media feeds, if you look at the amount of money that they're raising, like Kamala Harris raised 3 times as much money last month than Donald Trump did in his presidential campaign. They had the biggest grassroots fundraising month that's ever been seen in American history, right? That is for a presidential campaign. That is a crazy amount of enthusiasm. I don't think they're the same. Like, Donald Trump has his base and he has his, 20-30% of people who absolutely love him, and there's something to be said for that. But I think Kamala Harris is breaking through into the mainstream in a way that Donald Trump hasn't been able to do, in a way that other presidential candidates haven't been able to do. I wouldn't undercut that. And if you look at the polls right now, she's leading today, I think, because people are so fired up for the future, and the future looks a lot more like Kamala Harris than it does like Donald Trump.
It is going to be interesting for sure. Mike Nellis, thanks so much for joining us this morning. I am sure, and I hope we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.